The door slammed behind me, letting in the icy evening air. I arrived at my parents' house for Christmas dinner, clutching a simple fruit basket, the same hopelessly bright one from the supermarket, $20. The plastic wrap crunched under my fingers. Her most modest BMW came to a smooth stop next to me, as if mockingly. Rebecca stepped out, and the trunk of her car hissed open, revealing a mountain of carefully wrapped presents in impeccable designer paper. I knew each one cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "Oh, Emma," she said, her gaze sliding over my colorful bundle, lingering, assessing. "Always choosing the simple, I see." I smiled, clenching my teeth so hard my jaw ached, and didn't answer. A lump formed in my throat. The golden child. Married to a corporate lawyer, a house with a 3-car garage, chair of the board. And I'm a living question mark in our family history, the very unsuccessful one, my mother whispers to her friends with a pitiful sigh. Inside the house was enveloped in a warm, suffocating blanket of smells. Roast turkey, brown sugar, marshmallows from my aunt's famous casserole. A hum of voices, laughter. My extended family was already gathered. Aunts in shiny blouses, uncles, cousins, my brother Marcus with the perfect Jennifer. And when I crossed the threshold, the conversation stopped for a second. That same awkward, ringing silence. "Emma, we're so glad you could come," my mother's voice rang out, and every note carried a slight but palpable tremor of surprise. "We weren't sure if you were too busy with your projects." "I wouldn't miss this, Mom," I breathed, placing my pitiful basket on the counter, where it disappeared into the background, nestled among a mountain of immaculate jewelry boxes and shiny Rebecca cases. Uncle Richard, already smelling of whiskey, immediately perked up. "So, Emma's still doing that internet thing. What do you call it?" "E-commerce," I said quietly, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. Right, selling things online. My neighbor does that too, makes a couple $100 a month from his crafts." He chuckled, his gaze saying, "Not a bad hobby for a girl." I cringed. I plopped down on the couch and accepted a glass of wine from my cousin. The TV droned on in the background, broadcasting the local news, but everyone was listening only to Rebecca. Another triumph. She'd been featured in the magazine as one of 40 successful professionals under 40. The photographer spent 3 hours getting the perfect shot, she declared, showing everyone her phone screen. They needed everything to be perfect for the cover. "We're so proud," beamed my father, his voice booming, filling the room. "The cover! It's a real success." Aunt Linda turned to me, her eyes shining with sweet, sticky sympathy. "And you, Emma dear, still live in that little apartment downtown?" "Yes, Aunt Linda," I replied, and my yes sounded somehow muffled, as if from under a thick layer of water. "Well, that's okay. Not everyone needs a big house. It's very practical for someone with a small income." Her hand, cold and bony, lay on mine and patted it. I barely resisted the urge to pull mine away. Dinner was served promptly at 6. I was seated at the far end of the huge, extendable table, between my teenage cousin, who was glued to his phone, and Uncle Richard, who already reeked of bourbon and condescension. "Turkey, Emma?" my mother's voice echoed across the table. "Or are you on one of those fad diets? I know income can be slim when you're self-employed." "Turkey is excellent, Mom," I said, my voice smooth and quiet, like a honed blade. Rebecca, sitting next to her father, was telling him about their upcoming vacation in the Maldives. "The resort is exclusive," she explained, every syllable polished to a shine. "You need a recommendation from a current member to even book a room." "That's the kind of success we like to see," my father declared, looking around at everyone present, as if ending the discussion. "Work hard, climb the career ladder, invest wisely." And then, as if on cue, Marcus interjected. "Remember when Emma wanted to quit her marketing job to become an entrepreneur?" He made scornful air quotes with his fingers. "We all tried to talk some sense into her." I was so worried, my mother shook her head, a flicker of genuine concern in her eyes that only made my heart ache more. A stable job with benefits, and she just quit. How long has it been? 5 years of this online store experiment, Rebecca interjected, her voice dripping with mock, syrupy concern. 6, I said, looking straight ahead as I cut into the white turkey meat. It crumbled under the knife. 6 years. Oh dear, don't you think it's time to get back to a real career? My mother persisted. I could ask Douglas if there are any openings for administrative positions at his company. Douglas, Rebecca's husband, who showed up later after his important call, nodded condescendingly across the table. Glad to help the family, he said slowly, as if explaining something deeply complex. We all need to be realistic about our limitations. I continued to sit in my corner, and dinner flowed on, spilling into the room like a viscous, lulling syrup of other people's victories. Marcus beamed as he announced his new promotion. Jennifer, with a businesslike air, recounted her election to the student council. Even my teenage cousin, looking up from his screen for a second, muttered something about the dean's list. Every few minutes, a glance would fall on me, quick, cautious, filled with that caustic kindness that stings more than open ridicule. It's important to know when to give up, Uncle Richard suddenly proclaimed loudly, pointing at me with a fork dangling from a piece of pie. Chasing dreams is fine when you're young, but at some point, you have to accept reality. Earn a steady paycheck, build a retirement fund, be responsible. He said it as if he were reading an immutable truth from stone tablets. Emma was always a dreamer, Aunt Linda chimed in with a sweet, whining voice. Remember what she was like as a child? Always making up stories, living in fantasy worlds. Some people never grow out of that. Her words hung in the air like a reproach. We moved into the living room. The television, a relentless background, droned on with the evening news. The aroma of my mother's famous apple pie mingled with the rich notes of Rebecca's perfume as she sipped her coffee and described her new kitchen. The countertops are Italian marble, she said, every syllable polished to a dazzling shine. The installer said it was the best material he'd ever worked with. Of course, you have to invest in quality when you can afford it. Her voice held such calm, natural superiority that my stomach churned. I took the smallest piece of pie and hid in my corner chair, an old, slightly battered one turned away from the crowd. Emma, honey, my mother's voice sounded right above me, have you considered taking a business course? Maybe learn some real skills? I'm worried that you're living paycheck to paycheck at your age. I'm fine, Mom, I managed to choke out, feeling that phrase, my only defense, crumble into dust. Fine isn't good enough, my father interjected, his deep voice a hollow thud somewhere beneath my ribs. You're 34. You should be successful by now. Look at your sister. House, car, investments, respect in the community. That's what success looks like. Rebecca lowered her eyes modestly, but a triumphant smile played at the corners of her lips. I worked really hard, made smart choices, followed the proven path. Exactly, Douglas agreed, leaning back on the couch. The proven path, not these get-rich-quick internet schemes. And then everyone chimed in. My cousin's wife Amanda pompously quoted some article about online business failures. My mother's voice trembled with disappointment as she spoke of retirement savings and real estate, which I don't own. Uncle Richard, already quite drunk, raised his glass to me. Stop playing the entrepreneur and get serious about life. Their words wove together into a dense, suffocating web. The room shrank to the size of an aquarium, where I was that pitiful little fish everyone watched with pity. Playing at being an entrepreneur with your little online store, Rebecca suddenly laughed, her laughter sounding like a door slamming. Sorry, but that's how it is. Playing as if. We're all too polite to say it outright, but someone has to, for your own good. The silence that followed these words was deafening. The hiss of the fireplace and the announcer's voice on the TV could be clearly heard. We love you, Emma, Aunt Linda whispered, her voice cutting like a knife. That's why this is so hard to watch. You're too old for this kind of play. Playing? My father repeated, glaring at me. That's the perfect word. While everyone else is building real careers, real wealth, real legacies, you're playing. I saw tears well up in my mother's eyes. I lie awake at night worrying about you, still in that little apartment, still pretending to run a business without achieving anything in life. Marcus leaned forward, adopting the pose of a reasonable, caring advisor. Listen, sis, we're conducting an intervention here because we care. You need to hear the truth. This fantasy you're living in, it's unsustainable. It's not real. I inhaled slowly. The air felt thick and sticky. I reached for my now cold cup. To my surprise, my hand didn't shake. "What do you even sell?" Jennifer asked, her question laced with genuine curiosity and disbelief. "I've never even seen your website." "Because there probably isn't one," Douglas said dismissively, not even looking at me. "Or if there is, it's one of those pathetic little Etsy shops with 3 items and no sales." A commercial started playing on the TV, a cheerful jingle about Christmas sales, cutting into the heavy atmosphere of the room. Rebecca stood up to cut herself another piece of pie. Her figure, slender and confident, blocked the light from the lamp. "Emma, I'm going to be very blunt because I'm your sister and I love you. You're a disgrace to yourself. You're a disgrace to this family. Every time someone asks what you do, we have to justify ourselves. It's humiliating." "Humiliating," Mom echoed, wiping the corners of her eyes with a handkerchief. "When Patricia asked me at book club, I could show off Rebecca's cover, but about you, I had to say you were working on some online projects." I saw the pity in her eyes. My father set down his cup with a force that made the saucer rattle. "It's over, Emma. New Year's resolution. You're going to get a real job. I don't care if it's entry level. At least it'll be legitimate." Marcus, as if throwing a life preserver to a drowning man, added, "I can probably set you up with an interview at my company. They're always looking for help desk people. It's not glamorous, but it's honest work. A real job." His voice was so condescending, so paternal, that my insides went cold. At that moment, the commercials on the TV stopped. Some local Saturday program started playing, but no one was listening. Rebecca, recovering from her momentary confusion, resumed her refrain about the upcoming promotion. Uncle Richard, looking grim, refilled his bourbon. Mom quietly collected empty plates. "Today on News Center Special Report," the anchor's voice suddenly boomed from the screen, clear and professional, "an exclusive look at one of the most extraordinary business success stories of the decade, how a young entrepreneur turned a simple idea into a global empire worth billions." No one was paying attention. The din of voices drowned out the television. Rebecca gestured, explaining something about corporate strategy. "Our topic today," the voice continued, insistently cutting into the space, "focuses on Emma Chin, the elusive founder and CEO of Lux Global Holdings, whose revolutionary approach to sustainable luxury has upended the entire retail industry." Mom whirled around to look at the screen. The porcelain dessert plate slipped from her hands and hit the edge of the table with a dull clang, wobbled but didn't break. The room went silent for a second. A stunning aerial photo appeared on the screen, a vast high-tech campus glittering in the sun, like a city of the future. The caption read, "Lux Global Holdings Headquarters, Shanghai." "What?" my father breathed, his voice somewhere between astonishment and disbelief. "That's Emma's name," my cousin drawled, finally looking up from his phone. Rebecca's face turned the color of the milky porcelain she'd just served the cake on. It must be another Emma. It's a common name." But panic was already flickering in her eyes, cold and sharp. And at that moment, a photograph appeared on the screen. Me. In a perfectly tailored navy blue suit, my hair pulled back into a crisp, low bun, shaking hands with the President of France against a backdrop of national flags. The caption glowed like a torch in the darkness. Emma Chin, 34, founder and CEO of Lux Global Holdings. The reporter's voice, deep and full of admiration, filled every corner of the room, displacing everything else. Emma Chin's story is one of vision, secrecy, and incredible execution. 6 years ago, she quietly left her corporate marketing job to pursue what her family considered a small online experiment. The glass of bourbon in Uncle Richard's hand froze halfway to his mouth. His fingers turned white. Images swam across the screen. Vast, bright workshops where skilled hands crafted incredibly beautiful bags and breathtaking shoes. Then came the windows of the world's most luxurious department stores: Paris, London, Tokyo, New York, and everywhere the logo of her company, my company. Annual revenue exceeds $7 billion, the voice rang out, and each word fell into the deathly silence like a bolt from the blue. A recent estimate places Emma Chin's personal fortune at approximately $7.2 billion. Mom clutched the back of her chair, making a short, broken sound, as if someone had punched her in the solar plexus. And again, I was on the screen, on the TED stage, in the UN auditorium, on the cover of Forbes. My face, calm and confident, looked at them from all sides, crashing down on them like an avalanche of evidence. Chin is known for her privacy, the reporter explained, and his words now sounded like a deafening indictment of everything that had transpired in that living room over the past few hours. Those closest to her had no idea the scale of her success. Rebecca's mouth hung open. Her lips moved silently, her eyes wide, filled with mute horror and the utter collapse of her entire universe. When the program cut to commercials, a complete, ringing silence fell over the room. Then it was broken by a chorus of muffled cries, directed at nothing. This can't be. The same Emma Chin? 7 billion. This is our Emma? My father rose from his chair. His face was crimson, the veins in his neck bulging. He turned to me, and a storm of shame, disbelief, and some kind of wild primal fear raged in his eyes. Emma, his voice broke into a croak. Emma, is this true? Is this real? I set my white porcelain cup on the table. The sound was tiny, clear, like the click of a lock. Yes. That one short word hung in the air, heavy and irrefutable. You own... Mom tried to say something, but her voice broke into a hoarse whisper. She couldn't get it out. Lux Global Holdings, I said quietly, but absolutely clearly. Each syllable echoed in the deafening silence. Yes. Marcus, pale, was already frantically scrolling his phone screen. His fingers were shaking. Oh my God, it's all true. Emma, you're on the Forbes billionaires list, 847th in the world. It says here, your net worth, $7.2 billion. He spoke the number like a mantra, with awe. Rebecca went from deathly pale to a crimson red. Anger, shame, and a complete collapse of reality distorted her features. You sat here and let us... Mock me? I finished softly for her. Yes. There was no malice or bitterness in that yes, only a statement of fact, cold and precise. Douglas, forgetting his dignity, frantically searched his phone. His hands were shaking. Lux Global just announced a new initiative with the European Union. 200 million euros in grant funding. Emma, did you meet with the EU Commissioner last month? He looked up at me, silently questioning. Yes, I did, I confirmed, and my calm must have cut them like a blade. Aunt Linda was crying quietly into her handkerchief. Real, fat tears rolled down her cheeks. We thought you were poor. We thought you'd failed. We were so worried. I know, I said, and I did know. But now that worry, that anxiety, lingered in the air with a false, bitter aftertaste. Uncle Richard tossed back the rest of his bourbon, as if trying to burn off his astonishment. This apartment of yours, why live in an ordinary apartment when you're worth billions? I like my apartment, I replied simply. It's bright, it has nice windows, and it's close to my favorite coffee shop. I said it as if those were the only criteria that mattered. Mom sank heavily onto the edge of the sofa, as if her legs had given out. She stared at me blankly. Fruit basket. You brought a $20 fruit basket when you're worth $7 billion. I love fruit baskets, I repeated my simple truth. They always have kiwis in them. The commercial finally ended. The news anchor returned to the screen, his voice solemn. As a reminder, our exclusive special report, including a rare interview with Chin herself. My father's voice sounded hollow, deep inside. You've given interviews to this news, but never to your own family. I turned to him. They ask questions about business, about technology, about the future of the planet, I said. All these years, you've only asked one question. Why have I failed so miserably? Rebecca jumped up abruptly, hitting her glass with her elbow. It tipped over with a soft clink, and dark red wine spilled onto the snow-white tablecloth, spreading in a blotch like a bruise. "This is insane!" Her scream was high-pitched, hysterical. "Are you saying that all these 6 years, while we were feeling sorry for you, while we were trying to save you from your own stupidity, you were secretly this?" "Yes," I said again. The word became my only weapon and shield. "That's cruel." Rebecca's voice trembled with genuine, uncontrollable pain. "What kind of person does that? What kind of sister?" I looked straight at her, and for the first time all evening, something in my voice wavered. But it didn't break. The one who finally wanted to see the difference between loving yourself and loving your success. Marcus, still glued to the screen, read out bits of information, and each piece was a new blow to them. 500 million donations, scholarships, hospitals. "That money was supposed to help your family," Uncle Richard suddenly barked, jabbing a thick finger in my direction. "Your own flesh and blood." I slowly turned my gaze to him. "Why, Uncle Richard? So you can buy more bourbon? Or so Rebecca can order another kitchen, this time made of solid gold?" "How dare you?" Rebecca hissed, fury blazing in her eyes. Mom, oblivious, scrolled through her phone, her face growing more lifeless with every flick of her finger. Davos, dinners with presidents, real estate. "Emma, you have an island." She pronounced it like a death sentence. "2 islands," I corrected mechanically. "The second one is smaller. We're restoring coral reefs there." Dad leaned his head back in his chair and closed his eyes, as if trying to erase reality. "All those times we tried to help, offered you a job, offered you money." "I remember every word, Dad," I said quietly. And then Jennifer spoke, her voice thin and full of shame. "Last year, I gave you a gift card to Target because I thought you might be struggling." I nodded. "I used it. I bought bath towels. They were so soft. Thank you." Douglas sat hunched over. He was whiter than the walls. "My firm, I offered you an executive position. I, a corporate lawyer making $300,000, offered you—" Oh my God. He froze, unable to utter another word. "It was very kind of you to offer, Douglas," I said, and there wasn't a hint of sarcasm in my tone. Sincerely. Amanda, my cousin's wife, was reading from her phone, and her voice, choked with astonishment, cut through the silence. Business Insider calls you the most underrated entrepreneur of the decade. Fortune writes that you're rewriting the rules. The Wall Street Journal is publishing a profile calling you the billionaire next door because you're so normal in your personal life. "I am normal," I said, and it sounded like the simplest, most incomprehensible statement in the world. "Normal," Rebecca shrieked, a crack in her voice. "You're worth $7 billion. You employ 40,000 people. You're on some UN council. That's not normal." "It's not normal," I agreed, still calm. "But I'm the same person I was 6 years ago when I left my job. The same person I was this afternoon when you all explained to me the depth of my failure to the whole table. I haven't changed. What's changed is that you now know." At that moment, the doorbell rang sharply and deafeningly. Everyone jumped as if a gunshot had struck. Mom, moving like a machine gun, went to answer the door. She returned, followed by 2 people, a woman in an elegant trench coat and a man carrying a professional camera over his shoulder. They looked like aliens who had just stepped off a ship into our little world. "Miss Chin," the woman addressed me with a businesslike but warm smile. "I'm Sarah Winters from News Center. We discussed last week filming additional footage with you in an informal, family-friendly setting for today's special report. I hope now is still a good time?" The room felt like a ticking time bomb had gone off. You You planned this, my father gasped, his eyes flashing with understanding, mixed with horror. The crew, they knew where you were. I slowly stood up. I told them I'd be with my family for Christmas. They asked if they could film a few minutes of normal family interaction for the report. To humanize the story, I quoted their own words. Humanize, Marcus repeated dully, as if the word were in an unknown language. Sarah, meanwhile, began adjusting the lights with complete professionalism, nodding to the cameraman. We'll only need about 5 minutes. Very informal. Just Emma with her family, showing that despite her incredible success, she values her roots and maintains close family ties. The irony hung in the air like such a thick, suffocating fog that it seemed everyone was about to suffocate. We can't, Rebecca panicked, desperately running her hand through her hair. We can't be in the frame. Not now. Not after everything we've said. Emma, perhaps we should discuss this in a different setting, Douglas began, switching to lawyer mode, but his voice was shaking. From a legal standpoint, Ms. Chin, Sarah interrupted him gently but firmly, we're on a tight schedule. The report goes out in 3 hours. Can we begin? I glanced around the room. I saw their faces, shock, confusion, panicked calculation, bitter shame. They looked like actors who'd forgotten their lines at the most crucial moment of the play. Actually, I said, my voice firm in the deathly silence, I don't think this is the right setting. My family seems to be still digesting some unexpected news. Sarah, a seasoned journalist, quickly scanned the room. Her gaze slid over the wine stain on the tablecloth, over their pale, tense faces, over Uncle Richard, helplessly clutching his empty glass. She understood everything. I understand. Shall we reschedule the shoot? No need, I replied. You already have excellent material from the campus, from the factories, interviews with my team. This, I gestured toward the relatives frozen in silent pantomime, is not a necessary part of the story. If you're sure, Sarah said quickly, her eyes reflecting more professional curiosity about this unresolved drama than disappointment. They gathered just as quickly and disappeared, leaving behind an even heavier, ringing void. The silence after their departure was different. It was thick with rethinking, with the sound of crumbling axioms, with the desperate mental turmoil of people trying to rewrite the script of their own lives on the fly. And then Mom took the first step. Her voice sounded unnaturally high-pitched, strained with joy. Well then, this is wonderful news. Emma, dear, why don't we all sit back and tell us all about your business, from the very beginning? We're so eager to hear. Really? I asked, a slight, barely perceptible weariness creeping into my voice. Do you want to hear? Of course, she exclaimed, too loudly. We're your family. We've always supported you. I allowed myself a sad, barely perceptible smile. 3 hours ago, Mom, you said I was a disgrace to this family, that you lie awake at night ashamed of me. I didn't mean it that way. I was just worried, she babbled, a flicker of genuine fear in her eyes. That's exactly what you meant, I said softly, but firmly. All of you. Every word spoken here today was imbued with exactly that. Regret that I am who I am. Rebecca, gathering the remnants of her dignity, straightened up. Emma, you have to understand how this looked on our part. You deliberately misled us. You hid the whole thing. I didn't mislead anyone, I corrected her. You all decided for yourselves that I failed. I simply didn't argue with your version of the truth. That's not the same thing. It's deception by omission. Her voice rang out again, but now it held a hint of uncertainty. Really? I asked quietly, looking directly at her, then turning my gaze to Marcus. When you got your position as chair, Rebecca, did you send me voting reports? Explain your strategy? And you, Marcus, when you got promoted, did you call me to go over every career move with me? No. You simply shared the result, your joy, and I was happy for you, without asking for details. Just taking you at your word. Isn't that trust? Or does trust have to be one-sided? Marcus shifted in his seat, as if the seat had suddenly become uncomfortable. It's different, Emma. How? I asked. and the weight of 6 years was contained in that one word. Because we're talking billions, he blurted out, his voice breaking. This is important information. It changes everything. Important for what? I continued, each sentence a honed blade. To finally earn your respect? Obviously, yes. To stop you from making barbs at family dinners? It seems that way. But for our real relationship, for the connection that should be between us, that's the real question. My father tried to change tack, his voice strained with conviction. Emma, we all said things tonight that we regret. You have to understand, in the heat of the moment, we were just worried about you. Fear spoke for us. You weren't afraid for me, I interrupted him, quietly but firmly. You were ashamed. For me. There's a difference, Dad. A huge one. Uncle Richard, trying to escape the overwhelming discomfort, poured himself another bourbon without looking. Look, darling, we're all adults here. Let's put all this behind us, okay? You've succeeded, and we're damn proud of you. He tried to force a broad smile, but it came out as a pathetic grin. Let's talk about the future, the good ones. What future, Uncle? I asked, without batting an eye. The one where I pay for your pension? Or Rebecca's next exclusive vacation? Or maybe Marcus's kids' education at Harvard? We're family, Aunt Linda cried out, tears welling up again. But now they were tears of hurt and confusion. Family always helps each other. That's the whole point. You're absolutely right, I nodded. Family helps. When I first started, 6 years ago, which of you offered to help? Not with money, I never asked for that. With time, with genuine interest, with basic respect for my choices. A thick, shameful silence answered me. It spoke louder than any words. I sat at this table every year, I continued, my voice finally breaking with the memories flooding back. At the far end, I listened to your lectures on my inadequacy. I swallowed your pity, condescension, and outright ridicule. And I remained silent because I wanted to know one simple thing. What? Jennifer asked, her voice barely audible, her eyes filled with genuine, unadulterated curiosity. What are you really like? I breathed out. Does anyone here love me? Emma? Or do you love, respect, and only notice success wrapped in a certain sum with 6 zeros? My mother's face twisted in pain. It's cruel, Emma. It's unfair. Really? My heart sank, but I didn't back down. Rebecca said I was a disgrace to the family. Dad called my life's work a game. Marcus staged a whole intervention like he was treating a drug addict. Tell me, Mom, what part of that performance was love? The part that doesn't depend on a bank account? Rebecca's hands trembled as she hugged herself. You could have told us. You could have trusted us. We're your family. Trust us with what? My success? So you can immediately take credit for it as thanks to your support? So you can immediately ask for something for yourself? So you can show me off to your friends like a new, expensive toy? That's truly cruel, Rebecca whispered, her voice laced with genuine anguish. Crueler than laughing at someone's dreams for 6 years? Calling them childish fantasies, I asked, my voice growing stronger. Crueler than prejudging someone without even trying to understand them? Crueler than offering pity where simple human trust should be? Douglas cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the situation. Emma, in terms of legal ethics and family, I have excellent lawyers, Douglas, I interrupted him gently. A whole team, some of the best in the world. If you're going to offer me your services now, thank you, no. He paled, then blushed deeply, and had nothing to say. At that moment, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I glanced at the screen. A message from Liam, my executive assistant. The program starts in 2 minutes. Everything is ready to go. Special report is about to begin, I announced, rising from my chair and picking up the remote. If you want to watch, you can stay. If not, I'll leave after it's over. No one moved. No one left the room. They sat transfixed by a mixture of shock, curiosity, and some kind of morbid fascination. I turned up the volume. The dramatic "Special Report" intro soared across the screen. Tense music began to play, and the camera panned over the gleaming glass and steel of my Shanghai headquarters. And then, for a full hour, my family sat in complete, stunned silence. They watched the unfolding story not of a failed Emma, but of an empire. They saw workshops like cathedrals of industrial art, where thousands of employees, proudly looking into the camera, created things of incredible beauty. They heard journalists breathlessly describe our revolutionary, UN award-winning sustainability practices. They saw footage from ceremonies where I signed checks for hundreds of millions for my charitable foundation. They were shown innovation labs, government partnerships, and employee programs that seemed like fairy tales compared to their corporate benefits. They watched interviews with my team, smart, dedicated people who spoke of me with a genuine respect and admiration I'd never heard in this house. Every frame, every word was another nail in the coffin of their previous perceptions. They weren't just learning about my success. They were immersed in the scale of the world I'd built, a world they hadn't even suspected existed until it crashed down on them on the screen. They showed them frame after frame. Me on stage at a conference in Zurich, calm and focused. I'm on a workshop in Shanghai, wearing a hard hat, explaining something to a group of engineers, and they're listening with rapt attention. I'm in Brussels, shaking hands with a man whose face they've seen on the news. And then there's an interview with my team. People with impeccable resumes, with stunning diplomas, with faces brimming with intelligence. And they talked. They talked about my strategic vision, about my ethics, about how I inspire not through fear, but through clarity of purpose. They spoke of me with a respect never before heard in that room. Then the reporter, his voice almost conspiratorial, began talking about my personal life. They showed footage of my modest apartment. I saw Rebecca flinch when she recognized the interior. My 5-year-old sedan in a parking lot, and me in an ordinary supermarket, shopping basket in hand. Emma Chin, the voiceover said, is perhaps the most private billionaire in the world. By all accounts, she's the same person she was before her incredible success. And finally, Cambodia. A dusty road, hot sun, the cheerful hubbub of children. I'm cutting the ribbon at the entrance to a low white building with a red cross. And then, a moment that wasn't planned. A local worker's camera captured me, wearing simple pants and a t-shirt, squatting in the dust in front of a little girl with huge brown eyes. I was saying something to her, and she was laughing, pointing. No security, no pomp, just dust, sun, and children's laughter. Emma Chin proves that incredible success doesn't require an incredible ego, came the closing line. In an age of influencers and self-promotion, she built an empire in silence. And perhaps that's the most amazing thing in her story. The credits rolled, the melody faded. The room was silent, so complete that only the low hum of the television on standby was audible. Mom was the first to break it. The sound she made was like a groan. You built a hospital. 12, I corrected quietly, still staring at the dark screen. As of today, in regions where there weren't any before. And you never told us, said Dad, his voice dull, devoid of all color. You never asked, I turned to him. For all 6 years, not a single sincere question, only assumptions, only ridicule, and silent agreement with them. Rebecca was crying, not theatrically, not for show. She sat hunched over, tears streaming down her cheeks, washing away her flawless makeup. I called your job a game, playing entrepreneur. Yes, I confirmed. That's exactly what you said. I'm so sorry, Emma. Are you sorry for what you said, Rebecca? I asked, my heart suddenly clenching painfully. Or are you sorry you were so completely wrong about me? She looked up at me with tear-stained eyes and found nothing to say. Her silence was more eloquent than any apology. I rose from the chair. My whole body felt heavy, as if after a long battle. I have to go. Emma, wait! Mom jumped up, her hands flailing helplessly in the air. Please, we have to talk about this. Like family. Family. I slowly glanced around the room, meeting every gaze, frightened, guilty, confused. Is this what we've been all these years? Because I felt like an outsider here, an outsider, someone to be pitied and corrected. We didn't understand the magnitude, Aunt Linda exclaimed. We just didn't know. You didn't try to find out, I snapped. It's not the same thing. Marcus stood up. His face was ashen. What do you want from us, Emma? Be honest. We screwed up. We apologize. What else can we do? Nothing, I said, my voice laced with utter exhaustion. Nothing is needed. You all showed who you really are when you thought I was nothing. For you, success was more important than character. A bank account was more important than your heart. Social status is more important than simple human decency. That's not true, my father tried to object, but his voice lacked the same confidence. Then why? I said slowly, clearly, forcing every word to ring out. Why, when all evening here at this table I was torn apart, humiliated, the verdict on my life was pronounced, not one of you stood up for me? Where was your unconditional love then? Where was the simple, leave her alone, she's trying? Where was the basic respect for me as a person and not as a project that needed fixing? Deadly silence answered me. They couldn't find an excuse. There were no words that could mend this hole. I threw on my simple wool coat, the same one that probably now seemed the height of hypocrisy to them. I'll go back to my life, to the same apartment, to the same schedule, back to the same silence. The only difference now is that you know the truth, and you'll have to live with how you treated her when she was just a loser to you. You're not a loser, Mom screamed, her voice filled with genuine pain. You're my daughter. Then act like a mother, I said quietly, already turning to leave. Not because I'm on the cover of Forbes, not because I have islands, but because I'm a human being, and I've deserved respect all this time, just like that. Without looking back, I headed for the door, leaving them in a room filled with the ghosts of their own words and the crash of shattered illusions. Emma! Her voice caught up with me at the threshold, trembling, devoid of all its former confidence. What will happen to us now? I paused, not letting go of the cold metal handle. It's up to you, I said, looking at my reflection in the dark glass of the door. You can continue chasing the glittering tinsel of what you call success, or you can finally ask yourself honestly, why did you so diligently humiliate someone who was simply going their own way? The choice is yours. Will we see each other again? My mother's voice came from the back of the room, so quiet and lost that my heart sank. I don't know, I answered honestly, turning to them one last time. I need time to figure out if I want to voluntarily return to a place where, for years, they considered me a marriage. Even those with 9 zeros in their accounts have a soul, Mom. And those who remember what it's like to be a universal disappointment to those closest to them, their souls are sometimes covered in scars. I opened the door. An icy December wind blew in, swirling snowflakes in the hallway. Merry Christmas, I said, and stepped into the night. Behind me, through the closing door, I heard the muffled sound of my mother breaking down. My father's voice trying to console me, but the words were lost. A fragment of Rebecca's sentence. Tomorrow, I'll definitely call. We need to fix this. We're a family. But I was already walking through the crunching snow to my car, my nondescript 5-year-old sedan, bought with cash, which had never inspired a hint of envy in anyone. I started the engine, and the familiar quiet hum calmed my nerves. My phone began vibrating even before I pulled onto the deserted main road. Messages, missed calls. I switched it to silent mode and the screen plunged into darkness. Instead, I dialed the only number that mattered right now. David, I said when the other end of the line answered after the first ring, how was the broadcast? Flawless. His voice was composed and energetic, a familiar hint of normality. Peak ratings. Brand interest is up 300% according to initial data. All planned key messages have been delivered. The PR team is already processing inquiries from Forbes and the Financial Times. Good. What about the expansion plan for the first quarter? The documents are ready for your approval. The Tokyo plant is 2 weeks ahead of schedule. The Mumbai agreement has been signed. Projected growth is 18%. Excellent. See you Monday. I hung up. The dark silhouettes of houses, illuminated by fairy lights, floated past outside. A yellow light glowed in their windows, a sign of life, comfort, simple human happiness, unburdened by billions, betrayal, and the price one has to pay to finally be seen. The phone flashed blue again on the passenger seat. Rebecca, please answer. I'm so ashamed. I don't know what to say. I've been a terrible person. Give me a chance to explain. Marcus, I'm wrong. About everything. Can we talk? Mom, I love you. Forgive us, please. Even from Uncle Richard, an hour later. You were right about that bourbon. Sorry. I put the phone in my bag. They felt sorry now that the numbers had become tangible, now that they saw me on camera with presidents and hospitals, now that success had transformed from an abstract game into a tangible, awe-inspiring empire. But were they asking the same question that hung in the silence of my car now? Would they have felt sorry if I had remained Emma the loser to them? Emma with her pathetic fruit basket and suspiciously lacking mortgage. The answer was as clear and cold as the ice on the windshield. No, they wouldn't regret it. The lights of my hometown were left behind. Ahead lay the dark ribbon of the highway leading to my apartment, to my quiet, chosen life, to my empire, which hadn't needed their approval from the start and now especially didn't need their belated, forced respect. Tomorrow morning, I'll wake up in my simple bed. I'll take a shower. I'll make coffee in an old Turkish coffee pot. And then I'll open my laptop and run a corporation that employs 40,000 people. I'll sign papers for the construction of new hospitals. I'll approve the designs of the next revolutionary collection. I'll talk to ministers about the future of sustainable industry. And I'll do it without the heavy burden of their expectations, without the chilling fear of their disappointment, without this grueling 6-year need to prove my worth. The highway stretched ahead into a dark, quiet unknown, dotted with distant stars. And behind the wheel of my most ordinary car in the world, I suddenly became aware of a lightness filling my chest. It wasn't joy, it wasn't triumph, it was a deep, silent, final liberation. I was free.